Taking my question. This really is for both of you. A question about the Bashat. That's Iran's spy ship that has been directing the Houthis throughout this conflict. Is it still operating in support of the Houthis? If so, do you know where it is?
General, turn it over to you to address that.
Sure. We know that the Iranians have provided a variety of assistance to the Houthis over the years, including some suspected intelligence. We do know that some had previously come from the Bashat. The Bashat is not currently being used for those operations, but we do know that other vessels are contemplated for those sorts of operations, so we're watching very closely to see if they return to the AO.
I would also say that, when you look at how the previous administration conducted business with Iran, they really empowered Iran to fund and export terror all around the world, whether it's with Hezbollah, Hamas, specifically with the Houthis. I mean, it's very clear. I think President Trump has made it very clear that he's put Iran on notice. I mean, I'm sure that you saw his tweet today that essentially saying, and I'm paraphrasing, that any shot fired at U.S. forces by the Houthis would be considered a shot from Iran. And this is the president showcasing leadership from the Oval Office and frankly, bringing moral clarity back to the United States of America. We know who the enemies of this country are and the enemies of a free world are. And President Trump has put them on notice, as you saw with Iran this morning. But okay. Gabby.
Thank you for taking my question. I wanted to run back to TDA and MS-13 deportations to El Salvador's terrorism confinement center. Do we anticipate to renew that partnership as it will conclude after 1 year? If yes, what does that look like from a cost perspective? And how is Guantanamo Bay factored into dealing with criminal aliens and terrorists, considering this new Pentagon is more focused on securing the border?
Well, that's a great question. So I think part of your question about El Salvador should be referred to the State Department. But I'll say that the Department of Defense is proud to defend our homeland and our sovereignty in helping to deport transnational criminal organizations like Tren de Agua. We're proud to support that mission. I don't know, General, do you have anything to offer about Guantanamo Bay and our force posture there?
Sure. I just had a couple of things for you, Gabby. We do continue to have a substantial presence at Guantanamo Bay to ensure that we're ready to receive any illegal aliens that the Department of Homeland Security would like to send there. We're monitoring their requirements closely, and we're in daily contact with them to make sure that we can meet them to the best of our ability.
Tom?
Sean, if the Iranian ships are operational, start helping the Houthis, will they be targeted? And for the general, any sense of number of military casualties so far and any civilian casualties in Yemen?
Well, that's a great question, General. If you'll permit me to answer.
Sure, go ahead.
So I think that I certainly don't want to get out in front of the Commander-in-Chief and the Secretary as it pertains to clearance of strikes and who will be targeted. But I think the President's made very clear that all options are on the table.
Yeah, Tom, just on your question of casualties, military casualties, we have some initial estimates. I hesitate to say what they are because they're very much estimates at this point, but I think in terms of dozens might be a safe overall characterization.
Dozens of military?
Yeah, dozens of military casualties so far, but I really can't characterize it much better than that at this point. We'll learn more as we go. On the civilian casualty side, no indications of any civilian casualties. We, of course, have seen some of the accusations by the Houthis. We look at those closely when they do come in, but we have no credible indications of any civilian casualties.
And I'd like to add to what General Grinch said. Anytime you're close to an operation like this, having been in combat front towards enemy before, the fog of war is a real thing. So before we announce something here from the podium, we're going to make sure that we get it right. And I think part of that is just taking the time to evaluate and doing a proper battle damage, BDA battle damage assessment, sensitive site exploitation. And frankly, that stuff just takes time. And so before we make any sort of those announcements, we're going to do a real hard look and make sure that we get it right before we announce it to you. Charlie from CBS.
Yes, thank you, Sean. Changing the subject slightly. Is the DoD considering rescheduling the performance of young musicians in the Marine Band that was canceled because of the Anti-DEI executive order? And in a broader sense, is there a concern that anti-DEI initiatives may have a negative impact on recruitment?
Well, I think the President and the Secretary have been very clear on this, that anybody that says in the Department of Defense that diversity is our strength is frankly incorrect. Our shared purpose and unity are our strength. And I say this as somebody who led a combat platoon in Afghanistan that was probably the most diverse platoon that you could possibly imagine. I mean, we had black serving next to white, Christians serving next to atheists, Northerners next to Southerners, and yes, Democrats and Republicans in the very same foxhole. But the reason why we were so lethal in Afghanistan, and again, my platoon took an 85% casualty rate over 485 days, but part of the reason why we were able to accomplish the mission and the commander's intent was because we put aside our many differences as Americans. There were no hyphenated Americans with us in that isolated hilltop in the border region of Afghanistan. We were all just Americans. And really, when you talk about America's greatest strength, yes, we've got, I'm sure the general can attest, yes, we've got lots of cool, sexy equipment and lots of exceptional military training. I think it helps set us apart from everybody else. But what makes us exceptional fighters on the battlefield is our ability to put aside our many differences and unite under a common banner as Americans. I mean, for goodness sake, when we put aside our many differences as Americans, we went to the moon with less technology than many of you all have in your pockets and your cell phones right now. We're talking about a force that stormed the beaches of Normandy, scaled the cliffs at Pointe du Hoc, fought through hedgerows and beat back the Nazi war machine and saved the world when we put aside our many differences as Americans. And I know President Trump understands that our focus on unity and shared purpose is what makes us lethal, and so does Secretary Hegseth. So their guidance has been clear on this, and we're going to continue to focus on that guidance.
In terms of the concert, are you thinking about rescheduling that?
I don't think I'll have to take that question for you. I don't have an answer for you, but we'll get back to you on that. Oh, let's go to the phones. I'm getting a signal. We should go to the phones. Okay, we got JJ Green on the line from WTOP.
Hey, Sean, thank you for doing this. A question about Ukraine. Can you assess how the U.S. military, assess the status of U.S. military aid to Ukraine and the intelligence sharing, how that's going since it was disrupted maybe a week or so ago, and then restarted? What's being shared? What's being given? What's happening with that?
Well, I can tell you that U.S. military aid to Ukraine has been turned back on, as well as intelligence sharing with our Ukrainian partners. But I'll tell you this. The president has been very clear since his time on the campaign trail that his focus with the war in Ukraine is bringing about peace and putting a distinct focus on peace and really to stop the dying. And so President Trump, along with his national security team, have been heavily involved in, along with Secretary Hegseth as well, heavily involved with Ukraine and Russia to try to broker that peace, understanding that there will likely be difficult conversations to be had on both sides when you're talking about, the release of hostages, when you're talking about potential ceasefire agreements, when you're talking about territory. As someone who's negotiated with some tough people on the battlefield, I can tell you it's a tough, imperfect, nuanced, and complicated process. And President Trump and Secretary Hegseth certainly understand that, with on the forefront of their mind peace as their first and foremost priority. General, do you have anything to add?
No, I would just echo what you said, sir, which is, the status of U.S. military aid, it has been turned back on. We've got confirmed reports that it is continuing or is flowing back into Ukraine. And, of course, daily reports on the outcome of the intelligence sharing and those efforts. So all of that is as it was previously.
So I'm going to stick with the phones here just a second. I got Christina from Breitbart on the phones. Do I understand that?
Yes, thanks so much for doing this, Sean. Two questions. After U.S. strikes against the Houthis on Saturday, the Houthis fired drones and missiles at the Truman. Will there be a response to those attacks? And secondly, the Pentagon has deployed the USS Gravely. Can you tell us a little bit about what it will be doing there, exactly what its mission will be?
So I guess I'll address the first part of your question first, Christina, and now General, I'll let you chime in. The question of the Houthis. I mean, remind me what the first part of your question was, Christina?
Will there be a response to the Houthi attacks on the Truman?
It was that I got you. So first of all, we did get reports of the Houthis firing ballistic missiles and some one-way attack drones against U.S. forces in the region. Those attacks were largely ineffective and didn't come anywhere near U.S. forces in the region. Again, the commanders in command of those vessels were, they were completely on point with regards to defending. They were not effective attacks. And so I would also say the second part, the answer to the second part of that question is that the response is ongoing. I mean, this isn't, there's going to be, as I mentioned, a very clear end state to this. And I think a lot of that has to do with how the Houthis respond. Firing at U.S. military personnel in the region and shooting at our ships and shooting at our drones and putting American lives at risk is not a good way to end this conflict. The Houthis could stop this tomorrow if they said, we're going to stop shooting at your people. But they've clearly chosen not to do that. And so this campaign will be relentless to degrade their capability and to open up shipping lanes in the region and to defend our homeland. But General,
thanks, Sean. The only thing I would add is, the Houthis claim to have tried to attack the Harry S. Truman. Quite frankly, it's hard to tell because while we're executing precision strikes, they missed by over 100 miles. So I would just tell you their effectiveness, I would question anything that they claim in the press that they're doing or not doing. It's very hard to tell what they are just based on their level of incompetence that they've demonstrated so far.
Sorry, the missile misfire by miles?
Yes, that's correct. There's also been a number of other attempts to interdict vessels in the Red Sea using UAVs and some cruise missiles as well. All of those have been easily defeated by our fighter aircraft that are there.
General Grinch throwing shade at the Houthis from the podium. I love it.
I had some of the folks in here know that my previous job I dealt with the Houthis quite a bit.
Yes, you did. Yes, you did.
Happy to throw shade at them. On the question about the USS Gravely that you had, Christina. So she's deploying under General Guillot, the commander of U.S. Northern Command's authorities for maritime homeland defense missions. She'll go down, as Sean mentioned, into the Gulf of America and surrounding areas and be involved in the interdiction mission for any of the drugs and whatnot that are heading in. It'll be partnered very closely with the United States Coast Guard. So we won't share, of course, her actual scheme of maneuver here, but know that that's a mission that she's going down there for, and we look forward to seeing what she can do.
And on that point about the USS Gravely, I think it's really important that, the President and the Secretary have made very clear 100% operational control of our southern border. I mean, we've got probably close to 10,000 troops on our southern border. We're surging a Stryker Brigade combat team down there to reinforce the land border as well. But there's a sea component to this as well, and that's part of the mission of the USS Gravely is to secure the water routes in defense of our southern border. And so, Aaron, Daily Caller.
Thank you, Sean. Will the Department of Defense commit to firing or otherwise disciplining any remaining leadership that were directly involved in the Afghanistan withdrawal?
So we're in the process of figuring out what that investigation will look like. But I'll tell you, as somebody who served in Afghanistan and watched that unfold, I mean, I was horrified in a lot of ways. You think about how much time and blood and treasure and American life that was lost in Afghanistan over 20 years. You think about that for a second. I'm 43 years old. This country was at war in Afghanistan for 20 years. So almost half of my life, this country was at war in Afghanistan. And I personally watched, the men in my platoon, but also my larger brigade combat team, which was a part of the 10th Mountain Division, 3rd Brigade. We bled the ground red in Afghanistan. And I watched my men do extraordinary things in support of a grateful nation and in support of the mission there. And to watch Afghanistan be surrendered in the way that it was extremely difficult. And I think something that President Trump and Secretary Hegseth really understand is that when America makes a decision to get involved in any conflict, we have a moral obligation to have a clear-cut end state to what that operation looks like, a clear exit strategy to what that operation looks like, and to make sure that victory is clearly defined. And I think in Iraq and certainly in Afghanistan over the last 20-some years, I think maybe we've struggled a little bit with those finer points. But I'll say that the President Trump and Secretary Hegseth, they understand that when America gets involved in a fight, it's our job to also end that fight as fast as humanly possible, because we have a moral obligation to win and win decisively. Otherwise, you're going to have an entire generation of American warriors wondering what the hell it was all for. And I know that every day I wake up and I draw breath, I think about the men who I served with, who were my friends, who never came home from that fight. I've lost 30 friends in my support of the Afghan war, 30. And you ask yourself, you look yourself in the mirror, you ask yourself, what do we have to show for it? Not a whole lot. And so to your question of will people be held accountable? I think we have an obligation both to the American people and to the American warfighters who fought in Afghanistan to hold the leadership accountable in some way. Now, we don't know what that looks like right now, but to hold the leadership that was in charge of the Afghan withdrawal accountable. Because look, if you have a private that loses a sensitive item, that loses night vision goggles, that loses a weapon, you can bet that that private is going to be held accountable. The same and equal standards must apply to senior military leaders. So
I just want to follow up on what you just said.
Sure.
You said that there needs to be a clear end state. And I know the goal is to have the Houthis stop their attacks, but what is the end state? What happens if the Houthis don't stop their attacks or don't agree to say they'll stop their attacks? It doesn't seem like there is a clear end state, that this could just go on and on.
Well, in fairness, I mean, it's a great question, but in fairness, the operation's only been going on for 48 hours. And the president and secretary have been very clear on this, that the Houthis can determine when this ends. And until then, the campaign will be unrelenting until we, one, protect our homeland, and two, open up the shipping lanes there, so make sure that we have freedom of maneuver in that area. General, you have something that...
I mean, what I might add is, while we won't talk about it publicly, just know that there is a design to the operation. There are specific effects that we're trying to achieve, and there are specific targets that have been selected and approaches that we're taking in order to achieve the president's end state. So it isn't that we're just striking capabilities. There's an intent behind every strike and every target that we go after.
To that point, you mentioned that this is not like it was before. So what is different about the targeting that you're doing this time that wasn't true under the Biden administration?
Yeah, I give the short answer to that, and again, without going into too many operational details for security reasons, but it's a much broader set of targets that we've been able to action in this case. And the other key differences are the delegation of authorities from the president through Secretary Hegseth down to the operational commander. So that allows us to achieve a tempo of operations where we can react to opportunities that we see on the battlefield in order to continue to put pressure on the Houthis.
Thank you very much. Will this operation include sending ground troops into Yemen? If so, how do you achieve your objective of making them say enough without sending ground troops?
Well, I'll tell you, it's very difficult, if not impossible, for us to talk about force posture from this podium, because as a commander who's been on the battlefield, it's very, very important to keep the enemy guessing, keep your adversaries guessing. Now, that's not to say that we've got ground troops in Yemen. That's not to say that we're sending ground troops in, but it's difficult to talk about that stuff for operational security reasons from the podium. But General, you have anything to add?
No, nothing to add to that. Okay. I think that's exactly right.
Sean, can I follow up on that? You said that one of the things that you were waiting to do for the BDA was sensitive site exploitation. Does that include U.S. boots on the ground or any kind of American personnel on the ground to do that?
I can't talk about that stuff from the podium. But we have ways of conducting sensitive site exploitations without ground troops on the ground.
Yeah, it does not always require boots on the ground, and I'll just leave it at that.
So, can I also ask you about if there's any U.S. military assessment? I know that you're still on, the BDA is ongoing, but is there any military assessment about how much of the Houthis' capabilities were degraded by these first couple of rounds? And can you say anything? The President's Truth Social mentioned going after leaders, which seems to be one of the things that's different here. Can you say anything about any of the leaders that were targeted here?
Yeah, on the second part of the question, I'll just go to my opening statement where I mentioned that there was a unmanned aerial vehicle facility that was struck with several key leaders. Those were key individuals who led their unmanned aerial vehicle enterprise and were some of the technical experts in there. So think those types of individuals that we might be targeting as part of the command and control.
And so we have destroyed command and control facilities, weapons manufacturing facilities, and advanced weapons storage locations. But again, this campaign is ongoing. It's difficult to talk about all this stuff from the podium, and we're not going to say anything from the podium until we're 100% sure that we have it right. I got time for one more question.
You mentioned the President's Truth Social. Is the U.S. military considering military options for Iran?
I don't want to get out in front of the President or the Secretary, but clearly, I mean, I think the President's Truth Social was pretty clear, and I think the meaning is right there for everybody. I mean, I think everybody understands what he means. I don't want to get out in front of the President, but all options are on the table at this time. And that's all I got.
Quick clarification for General. You said 30 targets. Is that over all 3 days?
No, that was on the first day. And it was over 30 targets, so not a specific number for you, but over 30 targets, multiple locations, and then additional targets today and additional targets yesterday on Sunday and additional targets today that obviously I won't go into because they're executing now.
So thank you, everybody. Listen, we're done. There will be more of these, I promise, but thank you. It was a great first press briefing. Really appreciate you all and your commitment to telling the story of the warfighters, but thank you. We'll see you next time.
Thanks.
people. Well, thank you for joining us this morning. Last night, on President Trump's orders, U.S. Central Command conducted a precision strike in the middle of the night against 3 nuclear facilities in Iran, Fordow, Natanz, and Esfahan, in order to destroy or severely degrade Iran's nuclear program. And as the chairman of the Joint Chiefs will demonstrate, it was an incredible and overwhelming success. The order we received from our commander-in-chief was focused, it was powerful, and it was clear. We devastated the Iranian nuclear program. But it's worth noting the operation did not target Iranian troops or the Iranian people. For the entirety of his time in office, President Trump has consistently stated for over 10 years that Iran must not get a nuclear weapon. Full stop. Thanks to President Trump's bold and visionary leadership and his commitment to peace through strength, Iran's nuclear ambitions have been obliterated. Many presidents have dreamed of delivering the final blow to Iran's nuclear program, and none could until President Trump. The operation President Trump planned was bold and it was brilliant, showing the world that American deterrence is back. When this president speaks, the world should listen. And the U.S. military, we can back it up. The most powerful military the world has ever known. No other country on planet Earth could have conducted the operation that the chairman is going to outline this morning. Not even close. Just like Soleimani found out in the first term, Iran found out when POTUS says 60 days that he seeks peace and negotiation, he means 60 days of peace and negotiation. Otherwise, that nuclear program, that nuclear capability will not exist. He meant it. This is not the previous administration. The President Trump said no nukes. He seeks peace, and Iran should take that path. He sent out a truth last night saying this: any retaliation by Iran against the United States of America will be met with force far greater than what was witnessed tonight. Signed, the President of the United States, Donald J. Trump. Iran would be smart to heed those words. He's said it before, and he means it. I want to give recognition to the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the Joint Staff, General Eric Kurilla at CENTCOM, who did a phenomenal job, he and his staff, all of CENTCOM. Policy across the board, this was a joint effort, and across the Pentagon effort. I want to recognize the pilots who flew those bombers, who flew those fighters, who flew those refuelers, warriors. I want to recognize the sailors on those destroyers, in those subs, on those carriers, warriors, all of them. I want to recognize our soldiers doing air defense, base defense, QRF, warriors, all of them. Every American involved in this operation performed flawlessly. And I want to give recognition to our allies in Israel as well. This is a plan that took months and weeks of positioning and preparation so that we could be ready when the President of the United States called. It took a great deal of precision. It involved misdirection and the highest of operational security. Our B-2s went in and out of downtown Tehran, of these nuclear sites, in and out and back without the world knowing at all. In that way, it was historic. A strike that included the longest B-2 Spirit bomber mission since 2001 and the first operational employment of the MOP, a massive ordnance penetrator. The mission demonstrated to the world the level of joint and allied integration that speak to the strength of our alliance and our joint forces. As President Trump has stated, the United States does not seek war, but let me be clear. We will act swiftly and decisively when our people, our partners, or our interests are threatened. Iran should listen to the President of the United States and know that he means it, every word. I want to give congratulations to our Commander-in-Chief. It was an honor to watch him lead last night and throughout, and to our great American warriors on this successful operation. God bless our troops. God bless America. And we give glory to God for his providence and continue to ask for his protection. I turn it over now to the chairman for specifics.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Thanks for recognizing all of our folks out there doing our nation's work, and nice to see everybody on this early Sunday morning. Last night on the President's orders, U.S. Central Command, under the command of General Eric Kurilla, executed Operation Midnight Hammer, a deliberate and precise strike against 3 Iranian nuclear facilities. This was a complex and high-risk mission carried out with exceptional skill and discipline by our joint force. I want to thank every service member, planner, operator that made this mission possible. Their actions reflect the highest standards of the United States Armed Forces. This operation was designed to severely degrade Iran's nuclear weapons infrastructure. It was planned and executed across multiple domains and theaters with coordination that reflects our ability to project power globally with speed and precision at the time and place of our nation's choosing. This was a highly classified mission with very few people in Washington knowing the timing or nature of this plan. I'll refer you to the graphic on the side as I walk you through some of the operational details. At midnight Friday into Saturday morning, a large B-2 strike package comprised of bombers launched from the continental United States. As part of the plan to maintain tactical surprise, part of the package proceeded to the west and into the Pacific as a decoy, a deception effort known only to an extremely small number of planners and key leaders here in Washington and in Tampa. The main strike package, comprised of 7 B-2 Spirit bombers, each with 2 crew members, proceeded quietly to the east with minimal communications. Throughout the 18-hour flight into the target area, the aircraft completed multiple in-flight refuelings. Once over land, the B-2s linked up with escort and support aircraft in a complex, tightly timed maneuver requiring exact synchronization across multiple platforms in a narrow piece of airspace, all done with minimal communications. This type of integration is exactly what our joint force does better than anyone else in the world. At approximately 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time last night, and just prior to the strike package entering Iran, a U.S. submarine in the Central Command area of responsibility launched more than 24 Tomahawk land attack cruise missiles against key surface infrastructure targets at Esfahan. As the Operation Midnight Hammer strike package entered Iranian airspace, the U.S. employed several deception tactics, including decoys, as the 4th and 5th generation aircraft pushed out in front of the strike package at high altitude and high speed, sweeping in front of the package for enemy fighters and surface-to-air missile threats. The strike package was supported by U.S. Strategic Command, U.S. Transportation Command, U.S. Cyber Command, U.S. Space Command, U.S. Space Force, and U.S. European Command. As the strike package approached Fordow and Natanz, the U.S. protection package employed high-speed suppression weapons to ensure safe passage of the strike package, with fighter assets employing preemptive suppressing fires against any potential Iranian surface-to-air threats. We are currently unaware of any shots fired at the U.S. strike package on the way in. At approximately 6:40 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 2:10 a.m. Iran time, the lead B-2 dropped 2 GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrator weapons on the first of several aim points at Fordow. As the president stated last night, the remaining bombers then hit their targets as well, with a total of 14 MOPs dropped against 2 nuclear target areas. All 3 Iranian nuclear infrastructure targets were struck between 6:40 p.m. and 7:05 p.m. Eastern Time. Again, that's about 2:10 in the morning local time in Iran, with the Tomahawk missiles being the last to strike at Esfahan to ensure we retain the element of surprise throughout the operation. Following weapons release, the Midnight Hammer strike package exited Iranian airspace and the package began its return home. We are unaware of any shots fired at the package on the way out. Iran's fighters did not fly, and it appears that Iran's surface-to-air missile systems did not see us. Throughout the mission, we retained the element of surprise. In total, U.S. forces employed approximately 75 precision-guided weapons during this operation. This included, as the president stated last night, 14 30,000-pound GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrators, marking the first ever operational use of this weapon. I know that battle damage is of great interest. Final battle damage will take some time, but initial battle damage assessments indicate that all 3 sites sustained extremely severe damage and destruction. More than 125 U.S. aircraft participated in this mission, including B-2 stealth bombers, multiple flights of 4th and 5th generation fighters, dozens and dozens of air refueling tankers, a guided missile submarine, and a full array of intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance aircraft, as well as hundreds of maintenance and operational professionals. As the Secretary said, this was the largest B-2 operational strike in U.S. history and the second longest B-2 mission ever flown, exceeded only by those in the days following 9/11. Well prior to the strike, General Kurilla elevated force protection measures across the region, especially in Iraq, Syria, and the Gulf. Our forces remain on high alert and are fully postured to respond to any Iranian retaliation or proxy attacks, which would be an incredibly poor choice. We will defend ourselves. The safety of our service members and civilians remains our highest priority. This mission demonstrates the unmatched reach, coordination, and capability of the United States military. In just a matter of weeks, this went from strategic planning to global execution. This operation underscores the unmatched capabilities and global reach of the United States military. As the president clearly said last night, no other military in the world could have done this. I join the president and the secretary in being incredibly proud of the air crews, naval forces, cyber operators, planners, and support teams, and commanders who made this mission possible. It is their skill, discipline, and teamwork that makes this operation possible. I am particularly proud of our discipline related to operational security, something that was of great concern to the President, the Secretary, General Kurilla, and me, and we will continue to focus on this. As we stand here this morning, many assets are still airborne, and we have hundreds deployed. I ask that we keep our warfighters on their way home and our deployed service member in our thoughts. Our joint force remains ready to defend the United States, our troops, and our interests in the region. Thank you very much.
We will take a few questions, Phil.
Me?
Yeah.
So, is regime change off the table, Mr. Secretary? And to the chairman, you said the battle damage assessment is still ongoing, but do you believe that some nuclear capability in Iran remains?
This mission was not and has not been about regime change. The president authorized a precision operation to neutralize the threats to our national interests posed by the Iranian nuclear program and the collective self-defense of our troops and our ally Israel.
Thanks for your question. I think BDA is still pending, and it would be way too early for me to comment on what may or may not still be there. But thanks for the question.
Green. No, behind you.
Excuse me, Mr. Secretary, can you tell me, was there a particular moment when the president decided to pull the trigger on this operation where he said, now, rather than being, something in the holster, now we're going to pull the trigger on it?
I would just say, having the opportunity to witness his leadership, he was fully committed to the peace process, wanted a negotiated outcome, gave Iran every single opportunity, and unfortunately was met by stonewalling, which is why he gave them plenty of time to continue to come to the table and give up enrichment, give up the nuclear program. But there was I won't say the particular moment, there was certainly a moment in time where he realized that it had to be a certain action taken in order to minimize the threat to us and our troops. Yeah.
General, you say that General Kurilla increased force protection in Iraq, Syria, and Gulf and those areas. Were they given any advance warning the attacks were coming? And also, Mr. Secretary, when were congressional leaders notified? How long before the attacks took place?
Sure. To your first question, the risk has clearly been rising over the last few weeks in the region. Based on that, and not a particular awareness of this operation, we've made smart decisions to minimize the risk to U.S. forces in the region.
So they were given no advance warning?
No, sir.
In congressional?
They were notified after the planes were safely out. Well, we complied with the notification requirements of the War Powers Act.
After the attacks, they were notified?
They were immediately thereafter. Yes.
Thank you, Secretary. Two quick questions. Do you believe you completely destroyed Iranian nuclear program? And how about Iranian ballistic missiles? Your ally as Israel always saying that is biggest threat. And second question is very important. What will be your next step if Iran or militias under Iranian influence in the region attack U.S. interests or allies in the region?
And you can chime in on this too, Mr. Chairman. The battle damage assessment is ongoing, but our initial assessment, as the chairman said, is that all of our precision munitions struck where we wanted them to strike and had the desired effect, which means especially in Fordo, which was the primary target here, we believe we achieved destruction of capabilities there. Ultimately, wherever it may be, whether it's in Iraq or Syria or bases in the Gulf, as the president said, it would be as the chairman said, it would be a very bad idea for Iran or its proxies to attempt to attack American forces. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Regarding retaliations, Iran and North Korea are cooperating on nuclear and missile development. Do you think there is a possibility that Iran, North Korea, and the other forces, such as China, will join forces to retaliate against the United States?
Well, unfortunately, because of the policies under the previous administration, we drove those countries together, and ultimately that creates a challenging environment. For this particular operation, the focus is on Iran and Iranian nuclear capabilities. That's our focus here, is to not just say that they can't have, but President Trump has said from over 20 years, frankly, Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. And ultimately, he decided this is the moment, given their stonewalling, when direct military action had to be taken to prevent that from happening. Yes.
Thank you very much. General Kane, I understand OPSEC, I respect OPSEC. Can you say at all what security procedures are being taken to protect U.S. troops in Iraq and elsewhere in the Middle East? And Secretary Hegseth, as a global war on terrorism veteran, what do you say to veterans who may be concerned the U.S. is getting into another open-ended war in the Middle East over weapons of mass destruction?
Thanks, sir, for the question. I won't comment on what force protection measures are being taken in the region. What I will say is we're being proactive and not reactive, and being very thoughtful about ensuring that we do all that we can to protect our forces out there.
And I would just say as the president has directed and made clear, this is most certainly not open-ended. It doesn't mean it limits our ability to respond. We will respond if necessary. The most powerful military in the world is postured and prepared to defend our people. But what the president gave us, as I said, was a focused, powerful, and clear mission on the destruction of Iranian nuclear capabilities. Those were the targets. That's what was struck. That's what was overwhelming. That's what was overwhelming. That's what the Iranian regime needs to understand, as the president put out last night. He wants peace. There needs to be a negotiated settlement here. We ultimately demonstrated that Iran cannot have a nuclear capability. That is a very clear mission set on this operation. Yes, hold on. Yes, right there.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Question for the Secretary and the Chairman. How was this strike coordinated with the Israelis on a strategic level, militarily, and on a tactical level? Was there any direct Israeli military participation in this operation?
Well, I would say certainly Israel had an incredible military success, especially at the beginning and ongoing, in degrading Iranian capabilities, in degrading Iranian launchers, MRBMs. It's been incredible to watch what our ally Israel has been able to do. And there certainly have been conversations. I mean, General Kurilla at CENTCOM has worked closely in the defense of Israel for many years. And part of this operation was the defense of Israel and the ongoing defense of Israel. But as it pertains to this strike, this was U.S. operated and U.S. led.
We took advantage of some of the preparatory work that's been done over the past week and a half in terms of axis of approach. I won't get into the particulars, but as the Secretary said, it was a U.S. strike. We made sure we were not in the same piece of airspace and sky. Aside from that, that was the extent of it.
We'll take a couple more. Yeah, right there.
Question to the Secretary first. Are you concerned whatsoever now about the reaction from U.S. allies given the strike, particularly those in the Gulf? And to the Chairman, if I may, I understand you don't want to speak to specific assets and force protection measures, but do you anticipate at least having to bring in any further assets from other theaters to aid in force protection over the coming days?
We certainly understand the challenges of allies in the region, and we have been respectful and in working in collaboration with them as it pertains to basing and sensitivities there. Ultimately, they've got a lot of assets and people in those locations also where American troops are co-located. So that's a consideration of ours. We've been in close consultation with them, and we appreciate the support that we have got.
Thanks for the question on sort of the global picture. And as you know, that's one of my jobs, is to look globally at the entire range of challenges. We are always carefully considering our force posture around the world and then offering options to the Secretary and to the President. I won't comment on any future things, but the American people should know that we carefully consider those moves around the world and try to modulate as needed our force structure in the region.
Absolutely. Yeah, right here.
Thank you. What communications are being sent to the Iranians right now, and is there any possibility of diplomacy now or in the coming days?
I can only confirm that there are both public and private messages being directly delivered to the Iranians in multiple channels, giving them every opportunity to come to the table. They understand precisely what the American position is, precisely what steps they can take to allow for peace, and we hope they do so. Yes.
The president may not want an open-ended conflict. The Iranians may disagree. Are you prepared for a protracted war?
Well, anything can happen in conflict. We acknowledge that. But the scope of this was intentionally limited. That's the message that we're sending. With the capabilities of the American military nearly unlimited. So Iran, in that sense, has a choice. But we've made it very clear to them, this is nuclear sites, this is nuclear capabilities, this is the line that the president set, and we set that back. Now is the time to come forward for peace. But I think one of the takeaways from this as well is the unprecedented level of ongoing cooperation. I can't speak highly enough of the chairman and his staff and General Kurilla in CENTCOM, what they've done to look around the corner, to pre-position, to understand how an operation like this comes together. The scope and scale of what occurred last night would take the breath away of almost any American if you had an opportunity to watch it in real time. And I think Tehran is certainly calculating the reality that planes flew from the middle of America and Missouri overnight, completely undetected, over 3 of their most highly sensitive sites, and we were able to destroy nuclear capabilities. And our boys in those bombers are on their way home right now. We believe that'll have a clear psychological impact on how they view the future, and we certainly hope they take the path of negotiated peace. But I could not be more proud of how this building operated, of the precision, the sensitivity, and the professionalism of the troops involved in this effort. I will take one more. We'll take one more question. Yes, right there.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Concerning the justification for these strikes, in March, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence released their threat assessment, concluding, quote, Iran is not building a nuclear weapon, and Khamenei has not authorized the nuclear programs he suspended in 2003, unquote. So what new intelligence does the U.S. have since then that the Iranians have changed their position on nuclear weapons? And does this new intelligence come from U.S. sources and methods, or are we getting this information from other countries?
Well, I would just simply say that the president's made it very clear. He's looked at all of this, all of the intelligence, all of the information, and come to the conclusion that the Iranian nuclear program is a threat, and was willing to take this precision operation to neutralize that threat in order to advance American national interests, reduce the Iranian nuclear program, and obviously collective self-defense of ourselves and our allies. So he looked at all of it, understood the nature of the threat, and took bold action I think the American people would expect in a commander-in-chief. That's all we've got. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, do you have any of the WC-135s up to check for radioactive material in the atmosphere?
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining me today. I'll start off with a few things at the top, and then I'll get to some of your questions here at the end. But let's start off with Ukraine, because I'm sure that a lot of you all have a lot of questions about that. The Department of Defense continues to provide the president with robust options regarding military aid to Ukraine, consistent with his goal of bringing this tragic war to an end. And at the same time, the department is rigorously examining and adapting its approach towards achieving this objective, while also preserving U.S. military readiness and defense priorities that support the president's America First agenda. This capability review, and that's exactly what it is, it's a capability review, is being conducted to ensure U.S. military aid aligns with our defense priorities. And we will not be providing any updates to specific quantities or types of munitions being provided to Ukraine or the timelines associated with these transfers. But the Secretary will continue to make recommendations to the President for his decision on military assistance to Ukraine going forward. I mean, we see this as a common sense, pragmatic step towards having a framework to evaluate what munitions are sent and where. But we want to be very clear about this last point. Let it be known that our military has everything that it needs to conduct any mission, anywhere, anytime, all around the world. We have the most lethal fighting force in the world. If you need further proof of that, look no further than Operation Midnight Hammer and the total obliteration of Iran's nuclear ambitions there. So, switching to Iran, and based on the success of the U.S. and Israeli military strikes, Iran is much further away today from a nuclear weapon than they were before the president took bold action to fulfill his promise to the American people. And that promise was Iran will not have a nuclear weapon. And after the 12-day war between Iran and Israel, we have a ceasefire, and we finally have peace. And the Department of Defense will support the diplomatic mission to continue that peace by ensuring that we maintain capability across the Middle East so that the President and the Secretary of Defense have a range of military options available to defend both our citizens, our troops, our forces in the region. And as such, we don't have any force posture updates at this time in the CENTCOM AOR. Okay, let's transition to ICE and the Department of Homeland Security and our partnership with them. The department continues its important work in securing our borders and supporting the Department of Homeland Security. Approximately 8,500 military personnel assigned to Joint Task Force Southern Border continue to enhance U.S. Customs and Border Patrol's capacity to identify, track, and disrupt threats to border security. Since the Secretary authorized enhanced detection and monitoring on March 20th, Joint Task Force Southern Border has conducted more than 3,500 patrols, including more than 150 trilateral patrols with CBP and the Mexican military. The strong partnership and coordinated efforts between the Department of Defense and Customs and Border Patrol yielded exceptional results between June 28th and June 30th, with 0 gotaways across the entire southern border during that time frame. We have made incredible progress and will continue to work towards achieving 100% operational control of the border. And recently, Secretary Hegseth directed the secretaries of the Air Force and the Navy to take necessary action to establish national defense areas along the U.S.-Mexico border. The South Texas NDA, administered by the Department of the Air Force, will include federal property on and along 250 river miles of the Rio Grande River. The Yuma NDA, administered by the Department of the Navy, will include approximately 140 miles of federal property along the U.S.-Mexico border near the Barry M. Goldwater Range in Arizona. These will be the 3rd and the 4th designated national defense areas along the border, and will continue to enhance the department's ability to protect the southern border from unlawful entry. The National Guard is also playing an essential role in protecting the U.S. southern border from illegal entry and maintaining the sovereignty, the territorial integrity, and the security of the United States. over 4,200 Texas National Guard soldiers and airmen on state active duty continue to support Operation Lone Star, and nearly 70 Florida National Guard members are on state active duty as well. They're conducting base camp security at Alligator Alcatraz. In the greater Los Angeles area, approximately 5,000 military personnel assigned to Task Force 51 continue the important mission to protect federal functions, personnel, and property in that area. These federalized California National Guard and U.S. Marines have supported more than 170 missions in over 130 separate locations from 9 federal agencies, including the Drug Enforcement Agency, the U.S. Marshal Service, ICE, and the Department of Homeland Security. Okay, so let's switch gears to the budget. I want to take a minute from the podium today to applaud the Senate on passing the president's One Big Beautiful Bill, and I would urge the U.S. House of Representatives to do the same. This bill's necessary investments in shipbuilding, military ships, aircraft, icebreakers, unmanned systems, artificial intelligence, $25 billion for the development of Golden Dome, all of these things directly help achieve the president's peace through strength agenda and will help equip our warfighters to protect the homeland against 21st century threats. This reconciliation bill is a once-in-a-generation opportunity to revolutionize our nation's defense capabilities by investing heavily in service member quality of life, including housing modernization, child care, education reforms, healthcare improvements. I mean, all of these things are great, and the department is just laser focused on getting our warfighters the funding they need to execute their mission. Let's talk about recruiting briefly. A strong and lethal military, as many in this room know, requires capable recruits, and we're excited to announce that the Air Force and Space Force have both hit their recruiting goals 3 months ahead of schedule. Thanks to President Trump and Secretary Hegseth's leadership, enthusiasm to serve is at all-time highs. Since November 5th, 2024, the U.S. military has seen the highest recruiting percentage of mission achieved in 30 years. Let's talk EUCOM real quick. Over the weekend, U.S. Air Force Lieutenant General Grinkovich was officially confirmed as the next Supreme Allied Commander Europe and the U.S. Commander of European Command. He officially assumed command of the U.S. military mission in Europe during a change of command ceremony in which U.S. Air Force General Dan Raisin-Kane, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, served as the presiding officer. General Grinkovich relieved General Chris Cavoli, who's retiring from military service after nearly 4 decades. So congratulations to you, Chris, on a successful career. We're also very proud to have Grinch at the helm in Europe. And in closing, before I take some of your questions, I just want to take an opportunity to recognize the career of Lita Baldor, who's retiring after 20 years covering the Department of Defense. I want to thank Lita for her dedication to covering the issues, the operations of this department, and the people of this department in depth. And she's made my job and those who had it before me a hell of a lot more difficult, but we get it, that's her job, to ask those tough questions. So to Lita, congratulations, good luck in everything that you want to do, and thank you for everything that you gave this department. And finally, as our nation commemorates its 249th birthday on Friday, let us never forget that the freedom we enjoy in America is never free. Our freedom is ensured by the men and women in uniform spanning here at home and across the globe who dedicate themselves to its preservation. So let us never forget our fallen who made the ultimate sacrifice. Let us never forget their families who continue to carry that very heavy burden. And as we celebrate the 4th of July with family and friends at backyard barbecues, wherever it is that you celebrate this nation's independence, please remember that the very best of our nation remains forward and on watch. And so thank you all for your patience during what is a longer than normal topper. And with that, I would love to take some of your questions. Rebecca?
Hi. Yeah, so obviously with respect to Ukrainian aid, the United States announced that they are going to be withholding certain aspects of aid. Ukraine responded by saying that this is going to embolden Russia. What is the department's response to that argument?
Well, the president's strategic outset with regards to Ukraine and Russia has been one of peace. He campaigned on this when he was asked on a town hall with CNN about that war. He said he wanted to just stop people from dying. And so peace has been the president's highest aspiration. We here at the department support those goals and those missions. But it's important to remember that the stuff that I mentioned in my topper, like what we've done here at the Department of Defense is create a framework to analyze what munitions we're sending where to help the President and the Secretary of Defense make decisions. And so ultimately, our job here at the Department of Defense is to pursue the President's America First agenda and make sure that we achieve peace through strength throughout the world.
Thank you.
How about Olivia?
Thank you. As you said, the Air Force and Space Force hit their recruiting goals 3 months early, and the Navy announced that they did the same a month ago. What does Secretary Hegseth attribute these increases to after the Biden administration saw drops in recruitment and failed to meet those goals?
Well, I think, we recently stood up a recruiting task force here a couple of weeks ago to analyze and look at just these types of questions. Recruiting is a constellation of different things. And one of the things that we recognize here at the department, to answer your question directly, I believe that with President Trump as a commander-in-chief and Secretary Hegseth at the helm here in the DoD, leadership matters, and certainly their leadership and moral clarity as it pertains to certain issues, not just here within the department, but all around the world, has inspired people to want to join and serve this country in great numbers. But as we stand up this recruiting task force, one of the things that I recognized right off the bat was the idea of propensity. And what I mean by that is how we here in this department ask questions about people who might want to serve this country. And if you're an 18-year-old kid, propensity essentially means do you see the U.S. military as a viable career path moving forward? And so in the late 1980s, that number was somewhere between 25 and 27% of the country who believed that service was a viable path forward. After 9/11, we believe that number was somewhere between 25, 27%, fluctuating a couple years thereafter. But in between, that number has steadily fallen to, I think we're somewhere between only 7% and 11% of this country see military service as a viable career path moving forward. And so obviously, at this department, we recognize that that number is probably unsustainable. And while we have great recruiting numbers now, it might not always be the case. And so one of the things that we're trying to achieve with this recruiting task force is answering the tough question about how do we set the conditions here culturally in this country to have more kids want to serve the country and see it as a viable career path. One of the interesting things about that is the idea of the intersection between propensity and proximity, and the idea that when people are exposed to and see somebody in uniform on a day-to-day basis, their desire to serve this country skyrockets. Something we're up to 50%, that they see military service as a viable career path. And I think over the last 15 or 20 years, while much of the research has borne out that the U.S. military is largely a legacy force, in other words, grandfather served, father served, more likely for their son or daughter to serve, I think that's part of the reason why they're exposed to somebody in uniform. So part of the question that I'd like to answer as part of this, is that the department would like to answer as part of this recruiting task force, is the intersection between propensity and proximity. And if we can get servicemen and women in every community in the country and involved in community events, exposed to our kids in their high schools, whatever, I think that will help us solve our recruiting problem. So I think the Secretary is looking at a constellation of different things to sustain the momentum that we have now. But the reality is that leadership matters, and the President and the Secretary are inspirational leaders. Tara.
Thank you for doing this.
You're welcome.
So how much did Iran's retaliatory strike against Al-Udeid kind of persuade the department to look at the stockpiles? Because it did take an enormous amount of Patriots to defend that base against the ballistic missiles. And then secondly, on Iran, again, have you had time now to do a deeper assessment of the damage to the nuclear facilities? And have there been any sort of air patrols or anything like that to gather additional information?
So I'll answer your second question first. Our assessment of the battle damage around Fordo, Nantes, and Isfahan remains unchanged. We believe, and certainly all of the intelligence that we've seen have led us to believe that those facilities especially have been completely obliterated. And the interesting kind of side point about this, Tara, is that all of the conversations that we've had since Operation Midnight Hammer with our allies all around the world, but certainly also in the region, they say a couple of things. They share our sentiments about the degradation of Iran's nuclear program and the fact that we have degraded their program by 1 to 2 years. At least intel assessments inside the department assess that, and I think their intelligence shares that conclusion.
Current assessments by this department think it's been degraded or delayed by 1 to 2 years?
I think we're thinking probably closer to 2 years, like degraded their program by 2 years. But what we've seen almost, in fact, just universally among our allies, was them congratulating the United States, the President and the Secretary of Defense on that bold operation, and the idea that American action in Iran has set the conditions for global stability. You think back during my time in Afghanistan, when we would do sensitive site exploitations in Afghanistan, something like 20 years ago, almost all of the weapons that we pull out of those sensitive site exploitations were Iranian weapons. Like, Iran has been a major exporter of terror all around the world, and nations the world over have been subject to their terror. So I think that nations all around the world they know that when America is strong and speaks clearly, the world is a better and more stable place. And so I think it pertains to get to your first question here now. Remind me what you asked again.
How much did Iran's retaliatory strike on IED kind of press the department to look at the stockpiles?
Well, we're always assessing, our munitions and where we're sending them. And part of what we wanted to do here at the department was, again, create a framework. We can't give weapons to everybody all around the world. We have to look out for America and defending our homeland and our troops around the world. So, that's something that we always do. Both before and after operations, and it's the President's job, along with the Secretary of Defense, to determine how we use those weapons.
Can I follow up on that? You said in your opening, just to Tara's first question, or I guess the second question that you answered first, you said in your opening that this led to the obliteration of Iran's nuclear ambitions. And I wonder if the assessment is not just that you're citing is not that the program was degraded, but that Iran no longer has the ambition to even create a nuclear weapon. Is there an intelligence or assessment that says that?
Well, we believe that sending bombers from Missouri, 37 hours on a mission, not a single shot fired at them, took a very strong psychological toll on Iranian leadership. We also believe that the degradation of the facilities at Fordow, Isfahan, and Antez degraded their physical capability of constructing a bomb. And it's not just enriched uranium or centrifuges or things like that. We destroyed the components that they would need to build a bomb. And so when you take that constellation of different things into consideration, we believe that Iran's nuclear capability has been severely degraded, perhaps even their ambition to build a bomb. Ultimately, the President has said he's not going to allow them to build a bomb. The Israelis are not going to allow them to have a bomb, and they know that. And I think that factors into their decision-making process.
Is that a final assessment that you're citing there, or is there still more information coming in?
The assessments are ongoing, and every day that goes by, the intelligence picture that we have gets clearer and clearer. And as we get those updates, Courtney, we'll keep you updated. Mike.
Okay.
Okay. Noah.
Mm-hmm. Could you be more specific about the nature of the pause in weapons being provided to Ukraine? When did it begin? What munitions are being affected here? And then who was involved in the review that you're describing right now? And is that still ongoing?
I can't get involved. I can't go in detail about what weapons were paused and when, and what we're providing and when. Ultimately, the President and the Secretary will make those decisions about what happens with those weapon systems, obviously keeping in mind that the President was elected on an America First platform to put America first. And so our job as political appointees here in the Department of Defense is to provide the President a range of options to do just that.
Thank you. Is the Pentagon working on a joint fitness assessment test, which is a PT test that all service members would have to take, in addition to the one that they have to take for their services? If so, what will the standards be?
Well, we're currently reviewing that right now, so I don't have any details to provide on that yet, but when we get them, I will let you know.
So you are looking at a possible PT test for all service members in addition to what they have to take?
We're evaluating standards across the board. How about Wallace?
Right. I wanted to ask a question pertaining to Syria. I was going to ask if, does the U.S. have plans to continue to draw down the troop presence in Syria? And if so, are they confident that the current Syrian government can successfully keep under detention the 10,000 ISIS fighters currently there?
Well, I mean, certainly the president has talked about expanding our relationship with Syria, and I think we have high hopes there. But right now we've still got about 1,500 troops thereabouts in Syria, but we're not going to comment further on force posture there. But we're optimistic about the future in Syria, as the president has already said before. Mike.
I do remember my question.
I thought I saw you with your hand up.
Yeah. Do y'all believe that the Biden administration, the past 4 years, sort of basically opened up the door to Ukraine and say, take whatever you want, and without much idea to sort of keep control of the inventory? And is that one of the reasons why you want to see what's in the storage and not?
Absolutely. I think that for a long time, 4 years under the Biden administration, we were giving away weapons and munitions without really thinking about how many we have. And I think that this president was elected on putting this country first and defending the homeland, and then you couple that with our national defense strategy and a shift to the Indo-Pacific. And part of our job is to give the president a framework that he can use to evaluate how many munitions we have and where we're sending them. And that review process is happening right now, and it's ongoing. Haley.
Thank you so much. Thanks for doing this, Sean. On Iran, the IAEA chief said this weekend that he believes Iran could begin enriching uranium within months. Does the department disagree with that? Are you saying the secretary does not share that?
Well, I'm not going to comment on anything with the IAEA and Iran, but our assessment of Iran's nuclear program remains unchanged.
Could you also provide an update on the review panel on Afghanistan and what work has been done there thus far?
Yeah, we've got a great team coming together, most of whom will be here in July. And Haley, I think that's a great question. I just want to say, our strategic outset here for this review. You think back to the Vietnam War and helicopters on embassies, and I got to believe that there were a lot of first lieutenants, captains, majors who witnessed that, who fought in that war and thought, "Boy, I wish we could have ended this war differently." And some of those first lieutenants, captains, majors, I'm sure, stayed in and became 1-star, 2-star, 3-star generals, and then maybe led and commanded an Operation Desert Storm. And I find that interesting because in Operation Desert Storm, there's a clear mission, clear end state. American troops withdrawn when that end state was realized. And I feel like many of those 1-star, 2-star, 3-star generals perhaps retired after Desert Storm, and a lot of that institutional knowledge and that pain that was experienced during the withdrawal in Vietnam was probably lost. And then flash forward 10 years, 9/11 happens, 20 years of war in Iraq and Afghanistan, and we find ourselves at the end of the Afghan war in a remarkably similar situation that we were in Vietnam. So the question that I have here, and that the department has, is what happened? Like, how do we as a department make sure that something like in Vietnam and something there again that happened in Afghanistan never happens again? Helicopters and embassies in Vietnam, helicopters and embassies in Afghanistan is just not the desired end state that we were looking for in those conflicts. And so how do we get an assessment at the tactical, strategic, and maybe presidential level? The questions that were, how was intel reported during the withdrawal? How do we structure our report in the micro at the tactical level to answer a lot of the questions that the American people had, like questions like, why did we abandon Bagram? How did we end up in Kandahar? All of these questions are the types of questions that we're going to be asking. But ultimately it's about weaving these lessons learned into doctrine. And the idea that maybe we can use this review to reform the way that we evaluate and promote young non-commissioned officers and young officers. Like, for example, if you read the Afghan reports that came out every June, regardless of who the task force commander was in Afghanistan, those reviews were remarkably similar. But the end state was a disaster. So I think if you think back to my time in Afghanistan as a young commander giving battlefield update briefs as a captain to my battalion commander, if I were constantly saying that my area of operations was a disaster, it didn't have the ammo or troops that I needed to accomplish the mission, the likelihood of me getting promoted was probably not great. So how do we set the conditions here in the department to create a sense of honesty where our officers are reporting what they believe to be accuracy? They're concerned about maybe their area of operations. They're concerned about the truth and maybe not less about their careers. And that's not an indictment on the officers in the DoD. It's just the way that our system is constructed. And so we've got a great team that we've put together, many of whom will start in July, where the real work will start. I just had a great meeting with the chairman of the Joint Chiefs about this and how the Joint Staff can help collaborate on this. But I'm very optimistic about where we're going with this review, Haley.
Have you started interviews for this report? Or
Oh, sure, yeah.
What all has happened?
Yeah, I mean, we've done interviews, we've had meetings. I mean, we're getting a lot done. I mean, I feel really good about it. I'll take one more question.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman. I have two questions. Iran, China, and Korea. Iran has signed a deal with China to purchase 40 Chinese fighter jets. What are your concerns about Iran and China military cooperation?
Well, obviously, we're watching that. We're very concerned about that, especially as we look to shift force posture to the Indo-Pacific. But ultimately, I think that what we're doing here at the Department of Defense, building up our military with historic recruiting numbers, peace through strength. I mean, ultimately, it's about reestablishing deterrence to make our enemies think twice about doing things that we wouldn't want them to do. So.
Korea and regarding the reduction of U.S. troops in South Korea, are there any specific plans for reducing the number of U.S. troops in South Korea and changing their rules? And when will the time be?
Well, normally we don't comment on force posture reviews here from the podium. It's something that we always do. But and you've been covering this building for a long time. We've got an ironclad alliance with the Republic of Korea, and we're going to remain true to that alliance. But okay, thanks everybody. So we'll do this again. We'll do this again very soon. We'll talk soon. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.
Hey. All right. Good afternoon. I do not have that much at the top, so I'll be quick and then happy to jump in and take your questions. So as you saw yesterday, U.S. Central Command announced that the USS Abraham Lincoln, equipped with F-35C aircraft, entered the CENTCOM area of responsibility. The movement of the Abe into the CENTCOM AOR was directed by Secretary Austin earlier this month as part of broad adjustments to U.S. military posture in the region designed to improve U.S. force protection, increase support for the defense of Israel, and to ensure the United States is prepared to respond to a various range of contingencies. Again, we remain focused on efforts to de-escalate tensions in the region, and while also remaining focused on securing a ceasefire as part of a hostage deal to bring all of the hostages home and to end the war in Gaza. With that, happy to take your questions. Lita.
One quick follow on the Lincoln. It's crossed into CENTCOM, which means it's still out in the middle of the Indian Ocean, though, correct?
I don't have exact location. I wouldn't be able to give you the exact location of where she is, but she's in the Central Command AOR, and she will remain there.
I understand that, but she's still quite a ways from.
For more on her movements, I'd refer you to CENTCOM. I don't have her exact location, but she is in the AOR. I'll just leave it at that.
And then secondly, the Greek ship that caught fire, that was attacked and caught fire. The fire, I think, is out at this point, but do you know, is the U.S. going to try to do anything either through coordination or do something itself? Because it's still loaded with fuel.
So what, just for awareness, what you're referring to is the Houthis launched an attack on a vessel that was carrying approximately 1 million barrels of crude oil. I'm not. I know that the ship did catch fire. I don't know the status. What I would say is that once again, the Houthis have attacked a ship that is carrying oil and that could likely spill into the Red Sea, creating an environmental disaster. Also brings to question, what exactly does this accomplish, seeing as how they said that they were launching these attacks to help the people of Gaza. Not exactly sure how that helps anyone in Gaza. And this was a Greek-flagged ship that had a crew of Russian and Filipino sailors. So not exactly sure their intention. In terms of U.S. response, that through Operation Prosperity Guardian, we have ships in the in that region that continue to defend and protect freedom of navigation. The U.S. will assist where possible, but I believe another partnership was in the vicinity and was able to help assist getting crew off of that ship.
Right. The French got them off the ship. I'm talking about the impending environmental disaster.
Yeah.
Is there any effort ongoing right now that you're aware of that the U.S. is involved in to do something to mitigate what could be an environmental disaster there?
At the moment, I think we're working with that the private company, but I'm not aware of like right now we are engaged in any environmental mitigation. This is something that we're going to work with that private company on, but I'm not aware of anything else that we're doing at this moment. That's not to say that we won't in the future. Yeah. Joe.
Thanks. Can you provide any updates on the Georgia submarine? Is it still in transit?
The Georgia is still in transit. She's in the Eastern Mediterranean. And when she chops into the Central Command area of responsibility, it'll be pretty noticeable, but we can let you know.
And then can I ask on the force posture, the increased force posture in the region, it was presumably done in the aftermath of the Iranian threats and the threats from Hezbollah and others to retaliate against Israel. It's been a couple weeks, I think 2 or 3 now. We haven't seen that retaliation. Is it an open-ended deployment of this increased force posture, or until an attack happens, or how is the Pentagon assessing how long these troops and these assets will be there? Because some of these were taken out of the Indo-Pacific, which the department has said is the #1 threat to U.S. national security.
So in terms of a timeline, I don't have anything to broadcast in terms of how long the TR will stay in theater and how long the ABE will stay in theater. But in terms of your question on, timing of a potential response from Iran, we've moved capabilities into the region that I think it's fair to say have gotten into the headspace of Iran, and will influence their calculation on how and if they choose to respond. We don't want to see that happen, but we have 2 carrier strike groups there, each, with 4 destroyers. That sends a very powerful message of deterrence. And it also sends a message that, we will stand with Israel should we need to come to their defense. But I can't, I don't have a crystal ball to be able to forecast how long they're going to stay there. Only that I can tell you is that we are well postured should we need to come to the defense of Israel.
Just one last one. From what I tried to look up, the Secretary of Defense hasn't had a single call with his Lebanese counterpart. I know the Joint Chiefs have spoken to the Lebanese Army Chief, but throughout this and since, I guess, post-October 7th, and that's a key scene of what's going on in the region. Is there a reason? Is that a reflection of what the department thinks of the current government?
No, I don't think so. I don't have any calls to announce or read out. I think it's important to remember that the Secretary has calls with his variety of counterparts in the region, and it's not just from the Secretary, it's the interagency that engage their counterparts and at all different levels of government. Just because he hasn't doesn't mean that there aren't ongoing conversations at different levels of government. And as you know, whether it be Israel or Egypt or Qatar or any other country, the Secretary has engaged over time, and recently, well, I guess it seems recently, but was in CENTCOM a few months ago, and just leave it at that. Great, I'm gonna go Lucas, and then I'll go to the phones.
Sabrina, do you support Ukraine's incursion into Russia?
So we're supporting Ukraine and what they need on the battlefield right now. As you heard us say time and again, we are getting a better understanding of what the Ukrainians are doing in Kursk. Our policy does allow for them to engage in those counterfires, but we are still supporting Ukraine in what they need on the battlefield, and that is through different presidential drawdown packages. That's not going to change.
You said something similar last week, that you're still trying to learn what they're doing. I think it's pretty obvious what they're doing. I think for the whole world, it's obvious what they're doing. Why can't the Pentagon publicly support Ukraine's incursion into Russia?
Well, Lucas, to respectfully push back on that, I would say that we have and are supportive of Ukraine broadly. This is
specifically support this operation.
Sure. So, if you'd let me finish. So, when it comes to Kursk, we have an understanding from what President Zelensky laid out that they want to create a buffer zone. We are still working on with Ukraine on how that fits into their strategic objectives on the battlefield itself. When we feel confident that we have a better understanding of how that all knits together, I'm happy to read out more, but right now we're still working and still have some questions, and we're getting that back. And the Secretary is going to engage again with Minister Umerov. Yeah, I understand these things take time.
And also one on the Houthis.
Sure.
General Kurilla wants to destroy this group. Why won't you let him?
Can you repeat that?
General Kurilla, the head of U.S. forces in the Middle East, the CENTCOM commander, wants to destroy the Houthis. Why won't you let him do that?
I think I'm not sure if you're referring to specific comments. I think General Kurilla is in lockstep with the Secretary on wanting to degrade the Houthis' capabilities to being able to disrupt shipping lanes in the Red Sea and the BAM. And General Kurilla has done an incredible job of bringing together and leading a coalition of like-minded nations to degrade the Houthis' capabilities. And you're almost seeing them doing that on a daily basis. And it actually has degraded the Houthis' capabilities.
Attacks keep happening. We now have an environmental disaster in the making. You said 1 million tons of oil is about to be dumped in the Red Sea. This is a big problem.
Yeah, can I just say 1 million, potentially an environmental catastrophe of 1 million barrels of crude oil in the Houthis' backyard. That is an environmental disaster that they're going to have to deal with. And at the end of the day, you tell me what they say on how that gets to their strategic objectives, because I'm not sure that I'm understanding that. I'm going to go to the phones and then happy to come back to the room. Jeff Shogel, Task and Purpose.
Hi, I came in late, so I'm really sorry if you've already addressed this. Is the Theodore Roosevelt still in the AOR, meaning there are two carrier groups in the AOR?
Correct, Jeff. There are 2 carriers in the AOR right now.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Heather, USNI.
Hi, just to go on about the suit union and the environmental disaster. So at this point, the Houthis have now created a couple different environmental disasters and sank a couple different ships. You know, in terms of degrading, when you're seeing them being able to do this after all the strikes that the U.S. has done, do you think that the Pentagon has been successful in degrading the Houthis' capabilities?
Yeah, thanks, Heather, for the question. So the simple answer is yes, we have been successful in degrading their capabilities. They still maintain a robust arsenal, but we have been able to degrade their capabilities over time, and we have been able to protect ships that transit the Red Sea with our alliance through Operation Prosperity Guardian. So it's not for nothing. We still know that they maintain capabilities, but the fact that we have been able to do, conduct dynamic strikes to prevent ships from being harmed, to prevent innocent sailors and mariners transiting that region. Yes, they have gotten, a few attacks through when it comes to some vessels transiting, but we've also been able to degrade their capabilities, and I think that is due in large part to the leadership of General Kurilla and the coalition that he's built with the Secretary as well of Operation Prosperity Guardian. I'll take one more from the phone and then happy to come back in the room. Laura Seligman, Wall Street Journal. Are you there?
Hey, sorry for that delay. Just unmuting myself. A couple questions following up on the Kursk incursion. First of all, what is DoD's understanding is the strategic goal of the Kursk incursion? And then secondly, has the use of U.S. weapons in Kursk violated any U.S. policies?
Yeah, thanks, Laura, for the question. In terms of their goals, I would direct you to what President Zelensky said a few days ago, which is our understanding is to create a buffer zone. We do have some more questions on that. We are trying to understand more on, how that knits into their strategic objectives on the battlefield. And in terms of your follow-up, our policy does allow for Ukraine to conduct counterfires to defend itself from Russian attacks coming over that border region. And that border region does include Kursk. It does include Sumy. And so they are defending themselves from Russian attacks within that region. All right, happy to come back in the room. Oren.
2 questions. One on Ukraine. When you're talking about a buffer zone and Ukraine tells you that's what they're creating or says openly that's what they're creating, is there a limit that you have placed on the Ukrainians on how big that buffer zone can be? How wide of a buffer zone are they going for?
That's something that we continue to work with them on exactly what are their strategic objectives on creating that buffer zone and how, if they plan to expand. These are questions that we're continuing to ask, so I don't have an update for you right now.
So they haven't communicated to you, here is how far we're going with our buffer zone?
Not to my knowledge.
And then on the Abraham Lincoln, Secretary Austin had ordered it to accelerate. It's now in the AOR. What was its original arrival date supposed to be, and how much time did the acceleration cut off? How much faster did it get there?
Yeah, so I'm not going to get into timelines and specific dates, but what I can tell you is that in transit, Indo-PACOM had set up a few stops that were in the pre-planning phase that the AIB was going to engage on, and those were pulled down so that she could have an expedited in-shop into Central Command. Goyle.
Thank you, Madam. 2 questions, please. One, tomorrow morning, Defense Secretary, of course, will be welcoming the Defense Minister of India, Mr. Rajnath Singh. So much going on in the region in South China Sea and all the conflicts going on in Bangladesh, conflict going on in Pakistan, and also China's expansion in the region going on. So what do we have new now between the U.S. and India military-to-military relations when Secretary Austin welcomed him tomorrow here at the Pentagon?
So as you mentioned, it's happening tomorrow. So I'm not going to get ahead of the Secretary. We will have a readout. There will be a range of issues discussed. I have no doubt they will be discussing the close coordination and partnership when it comes to the Indo-Pacific, and our shared goals of maintaining and keeping a free and open Indo-Pacific. But I'm just not going to get ahead of the secretary. And once that meeting concludes, we will have a readout.
Madam, before my second question, how the two leaders are getting together? Have they known each other very well as far as relations are concerned, and how the military-to-military relation between the U.S. and India are standing today?
The mill-to-mill relationships between the United States and India are strong. You've seen that cooperation deepen, and not just from a DoD perspective, but from an administration perspective. Our close coordination and working together remains strong. And you saw the secretary, when he visited India, announce some of those deliverables. I'm not going to go through all of that, what he announced then, but it remains strong. And I'm just not going to get ahead of the meeting that's happening tomorrow, but we will have a readout after that meeting. I'm going to come over here. I'm going to jump over here, Louis, and then over to you. Yeah.
First on Ukraine, earlier this week, General Ryder said that the indications were that a small number of Russian forces were moving into Kursk. Is that still the same guidance, or can you amplify that just a little bit more and give us some information about where these forces are coming from? Are they sizable enough to potentially push back?
So I can't get into more details right now on the size and how many, how Russia is repositioning some of their forces. We know that there has been some movement, but I can't get into details on what that, more specifics on what that looks like.
And as you strive to get more indications, of the strategic purpose, are you seeing the Ukrainians digging in to try to hold those positions that they've seen so far, or does it seem more like they continue to be on a broader offensive?
Well, that's actually some of our, questions that we have for Ukraine is their intention to continue to hold, or how, when they say they're creating a buffer zone, and to Oren's question of, how large are they going to expand? These are some of the questions that we're asking, because if they are going to create a buffer zone that does entail creating multiple defensive lines. And so those are questions that we're working through with them. I don't have all those answers right now, but that's something that, the Secretary is going to engage Minister Umerov again in the coming days. When we have more to share, we certainly will. But I think it's important that, Ukraine also speak to their operations, and Ukraine should really speak to their objectives and goals. And that's still something that we're trying to learn from them on how this fits in to their strategic operations. It's important that, our support for Ukraine is still unwavering. We're still going to have PDA packages that come out from this building. I don't have one to announce today if that was going to be your follow-up, but we are going to continue to support Ukraine in their fight and whatever they need to be successful.
So my follow-up is actually going to be a follow-up to Joseph's point from earlier about preparing, changing the force posture for potential retaliation from Iran. That hasn't happened. It's been almost 3 weeks now. Do you see a correlation between any lack of action there and the new Iranian government essentially trying to determine its path forward?
So I can't really speculate on that and the new government that's forming. I think that by surging capabilities into the region, by having 2 carriers in the Central Command or in CENTCOM, by moving destroyers closer to Israel, should they need to be called to the defense of Israel, the announcement of the Georgia as well, having a squadron of F-22s also in the region, I think that gets into the headspace of Iran. And I think that gets into, they see us positioning, should we need to support Israel? I'm sure that gets to their calculation. What that means for them at the end of the day, that I can't speak to, and their new government, as you mentioned, I can't really speak to that. I can just speak to our movements, and we are messaging that we are there to deter, and that of course we are there to protect our forces, and if needed, to come to the defense of Israel. Yes, sir.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. Couple of questions. Before that, if you allow me, I have someone to introduce you, Mr. Mughal. Pakistani journalist, he's been in Russia and United Kingdom, reported many political events and other things. Now he's joining us from here. So the question is regarding the top Iraqi official visited this week Pakistan and had meeting with Pakistani military officials. And it's been reported from July that Pakistan and Iraq both comes to an agreement of $1.8 billion for the 12 units of Meshach training jets, and now they are in talks regarding JF-17 fighter aircraft that China and Pakistan mutually produced. So at the same time, when US is considering its troop withdrawal from Iraq, and Iraqi military is considering to get some Chinese technology from Pakistan, is there any concern from US, or you are aware on this?
I don't really have a comment to offer on unfortunately, I don't have a lot to offer on what you're asking right now. What I can tell you is that when it comes to our relationship with Iraq, the HMC conversations are ongoing. We are moving towards a bilateral security agreement. When we have more to announce on that, we certainly will, but I just don't have more for you today on that.
So about the USS Abraham Lincoln that just arrived in Middle East with F-35 fleet. So is there also something in the consideration with the US to address your Arab allies' security from that, specifically because we are aware that like US and Saudi Arabia both are in talks for defense deal, and Saudi Arabia continuously asking for defense sureties from the US. So in the context of Iran retaliation to Israel, is there something consideration as well for the Saudi context to secure their interest with this placement?
I don't have anything in terms of the, I think Saudi should speak for their own government and their own decisions. Our decisions are made on, what the secretary deems is needed for the region, and working with General Kurilla and others to ensure that, one, of course, we're always taking into consideration protection for our forces in the region. Two, we do not want to see, we know that tensions are high, we want to see a de-escalation of tensions in the region. Three, we're also sending a message that, should we need to do what we did on April 13th, we are even better positioned than we were then to come to the defense of Israel. Again, we don't want to see it get to that level. We want to see tensions de-escalate, and the best way for us to see that happen is through, seeing the ceasefire deal come to fruition. Our teams are working hard over there right now to see that be put into place, and we want to see the hostages come home.
Just a little on the high-level military mission you in the Iraq. So with the ongoing possible Iranian retaliation, is there any changing about the U.S. troop withdrawal talks or something that was in process, something in consideration?
The HMC conversations and dialogues continue. I'm not going to speculate on what a future attack could do to those conversations. Yes.
Yeah, thank you so much. A few days ago, General Ryder said that if we see any real threats from ISIS based in Afghanistan, we will take an action. So the Taliban officials claim that they eliminated Daesh or ISIS in Afghanistan. My question is that are the Taliban a partner with the Pentagon or with the U.S. government in terms of fighting Daesh or ISIS?
So the U.S. has a global coalition to defeat ISIS. The Taliban is not part of that. The U.S. works with like-minded partners and allies when it comes to to ensuring the defeat of ISIS. I don't have more for you on to anything additional to offer. I'm going to go to Constantine over here. Yeah.
Thanks. Thanks, Sabrina. CNN is reporting that the Army is looking to contract some boats to take 3 of the Army JLOT ships back to the United States. Can you speak to why this is necessary?
I would refer you to the Army. I don't have anything on that.
Thank you.
Yeah. No.
Can you give a JLOTS update more broadly,
Sure.
Specifically where the aid is that was left to be delivered?
Sure. So in terms of JLOTS, I think I read out, maybe it was last week, but we do have some of our soldiers and sailors that have returned back CONUS. We still have about 6 million pounds of aid that remains on the Cape Trinity. The Cape Trinity just recently left Cyprus and is moving towards Ashdod. We're hoping within the next couple days you're going to see aid roll off the Cape Trinity, and then when that happens, the Cape Trinity would be redeployed. But that's our latest update. Jim.
Back to Ukraine. So have you guys seen that the Russians, are they pulling folks out of the Donbass? Because that offensive is still going on. And is the Kursk operation having any effect at all on the Donbass?
So, in terms of where Russians are repositioning some of their troops from, I can't really speak to that. We know that there has been some movement, but, really that's not for us to speak to. I think when it comes to your second question, it remains to be seen how Kursk impacts the East. That's something that, we're still trying to get a better understanding from the Ukrainians on the long-term goals in the region or in that area, and also understanding how that fits into their strategic operation. So, that's still something that we're working through, and I just don't have that answer for you on how that impacts the East just yet, because I don't think we know.
Is that one of the things that the Secretary is asking his counterpart?
I won't go beyond the readout, but you can believe that the Secretary is asking a lot of questions. Yes, one here, and then I'll go to Liz.
Thank you very much, Sabrina. Russian President Vladimir Putin has visited Chechnya after 13 years. How do you see this visit, especially in context of Ukraine advancing into Russian territory? Is it a backstep of Russia, or is it a victory of US-led Western Bloc military strategy that as Chechnyan group has been supporting Russian army? So President Vladimir Putin has visited it after 13 years. So is Russia on the back foot right now?
I think you're seeing Russia continue to recruit and amass a force. And, they have that ability to do that. I can't really speak to this visit. I'm sorry, I just don't know enough about it to really comment on it. But what I can tell you is what we're doing. And what we're doing is supporting Ukraine, and you have the Secretary leading the Ukraine Defense Contact Group almost monthly. You have 50 nations coming together to support Ukraine. So that stands in contrast to some of the friends that Russia is turning to when it comes to procuring either security assistance or, whatever it might be. That stands in strong contrast to, the 50 countries and like-minded nations that are supporting Ukraine every single day in their battlefield needs. Liz, last one.
Thanks, Sabrina.
We have Liz and Lucas in the room today.
Yeah,
okay.
tag team.
With questions.
Moving back to the Houthis, why does the U.S. not have a larger presence in the Red Sea and Gulf of Aden? Because the Houthis are still having successful attacks.
So I wouldn't say that we don't have a presence. We still maintain a presence in the region. And it doesn't, just because the United States might not have a destroyer in the Red Sea, doesn't mean that we don't have other partners operating there that are either part of Operation Prosperity Guardian or operating on their own. So I think it's important to remember that this is a global coalition and it is a global problem. And it's not just the United States that is there to defend shipping lanes and to ensure freedom of navigation. It is on all of us. And that's what you're seeing, other countries come to the rescue and support of crews who, were hit by the Houthis, earlier this morning. Another country's ship helped rescue that crew. So the United States will always adjust its force posture there. But just because we don't necessarily have a presence in that specific strait doesn't mean that one of our partners or allies doesn't.
Thanks. Just a quick follow-up. Since these attacks are still continuing and the U.S. hasn't been able to deter the Iran-backed Houthis, how is the U.S. supposed to deter this potential attack from Iran on Israel?
And yet I just got questions about why hasn't Iran attacked yet? And I would almost say is deterrence working? I can't speak for Iran. The Houthis continue to engage in their, unlawful attacks against innocent mariners. I'm not exactly sure how hitting a ship carrying over 1 million barrels of crude oil and creating, a spill in your backyard helps people in Gaza who you said you're trying to help. Not sure how that works. Also, I think this vessel was leaving from Iraq and was a Greek flag ship. So again, not sure how that plays into your broader strategic objectives. And then, on top of that, what does that accomplish? You sunk a ship in your backyard and now you have potentially an environmental disaster. We're going to continue to hold the Houthis accountable. You see us do that. CENTCOM puts out, pretty regular updates on when we engage. Our commitment is there through Operation Prosperity Guardian. We're going to continue to engage where appropriate. And then, of course, when it comes to Iran, we have 2 carriers in the region. We have a squadron of F-22s. I think that sends a really powerful message, but I can't get into more than that. Yes.
I just want to follow up on that question. Why not strike the launchers? I mean, at the end of the day, it's driven so much global trade out. There's going to be extra costs that are going to be reflected in the economy over this. At what point do you need to escalate strikes on the missile launchers themselves to try to establish perhaps a little bit more deterrence, a little bit more order to the questions that have been kind of going around on that?
You're talking about Houthis?
Correct.
We have struck missile launchers.
I understand that, but it doesn't seem to have attenuated anything that the Houthis at this point are doing, and yet they keep imposing costs, and these sort of drib-drab attacks are driving more shipping out of that, right? I mean, their whole goal is to create as much disruption as possible, even if they take environmental damage at the end of it. I mean, is there some calculus, some metric that attacks get to X amount and we would respond in a more forceful manner to send maybe a clearer deterrent?
I think every single day that we respond and we blow something up that they are about to launch does send a forceful message. And even though they continue to launch their attacks, we are still degrading their capabilities. And every single day that they launch attacks, they're not always successful. They're not always hitting a ship. They're not always, their intentions, while, can't get into their mindset, they're not always achieving their goals. And sometimes, things are landing, miles and miles away from their intended targets. So what is also their objective and their goals at the end of the day? To your question on the launchers, I mean, from looking at some of the strikes we've done, we've hit over 150 launchers. We're going to continue to take the actions that we need to protect commercial shipping, to protect our forces in the region, and we're just going to continue to do that day in and day out. I'm going to go to Mike, and then I'm going to wrap up.
It just does not appear that this international coalition is finding success against the Houthis. These attacks keep happening.
I would actually push back on that and say it doesn't appear that the attacks that the Houthis are launching, be it every single day, every other day, every few days, are actually meeting their intended targets. They just created an environmental disaster right outside their own home country. Like, what purpose does that serve? That is going to have lasting impacts, and they've done that before. I mean, what kind of impact does that have for the region?
Their goal is to degrade shipping, and they're doing it.
So I'll just one more on this. While they continue to launch attacks, we have ensured that shipping has continued through those shipping lanes. We want to see it. We want to see it protected. That's why you have Operation Prosperity Guardian. We're going to continue to do our jobs, and we'll leave it at that. Mike, and then we'll wrap up.
The British MOD said the Russians have been forced to create ad hoc infantry units out of support personnel and Air Force units to engage the Ukrainians in the Kursk region. Can the Pentagon confirm that? What does that say about the Russians' ability to oppose Ukraine? The fact that they don't have enough, apparently, mainline infantry units.
I can't confirm those reports. I haven't seen what you're referencing. This is something that we are talking to the Ukrainians about what their long-term objectives are in Kursk, and creating that buffer zone, what that means in terms of their own commitment and military power, how much they're going to need for that region. That's something that we're continuing to work with them on. Okay, thanks everyone.
the terrorists.